Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's incredible story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a single video. Today, we're bringing you a story that's shocking, emotional, and completely unforgettable. It's about courage, resilience, and standing up against injustice in the face of racism and entitlement. You're about to witness a confrontation that flips the script entirely, where someone underestimated the wrong person, and the results are absolutely jaw-dropping. So buckle up, stay tuned, and trust me, you'll want to watch every second of this. Let's get into it. It was a calm, sunny morning at the Marina, the kind of day where the water glimmered like liquid glass, and the scent of pine and salt hung heavy in the air. But peace was about to shatter. She had been coming to this marina for years, quietly enjoying the quiet corners, her boat bobbing gently as the world passed by. Today, though, that tranquility would be ripped apart. He appeared out of nowhere, a man whose presence seemed to fill the space with arrogance. The kind of man who believed rules were made only for other people, not him. And today, his target was her. She hadn't done anything, just anchored her boat where she always did, but to him, that was a challenge. A white man with a sense of entitlement so thick you could taste it in the air, marching toward her as if she didn't belong. "Move your boat," he said. Sharp, commanding, like he was a king and she was some invisible subject. His words carried the weight of assumed authority, but she felt something stir inside her, a quiet strength, a refusal to be intimidated. She looked at him, steady and calm, but inside her heart was pounding. How could someone think they had the right to tell her where she could or couldn't be? Around them, people glanced nervously, sensing the tension, unsure who would blink first. He didn't wait for an answer, stepping closer, hands gesturing like he owned the space. But what he didn't know, what nobody could have guessed, was that this confrontation wasn't just about a boat. It was about power, about control, about history twisting in ways no one expected. She took a slow breath, her eyes locking onto his, unflinching. For a moment, silence hung over the marina, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your mind race. Then she smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of her lips. A smile that didn't just come from confidence, but from knowing something he couldn't possibly imagine. Because the truth was shocking. The kind of truth that flips the story entirely. The kind of truth that could make someone like him feel powerless, exposed, and utterly small. She wasn't just anyone he could order around. She wasn't just some outsider to be moved at his whim. In fact, she owned everything, every inch of that water, every dock, every corner of that marina. And as he stood there, thinking he held the upper hand, she prepared to turn the tables in a way that would leave him speechless, and everyone watching, stunned. What happens next? How does someone go from being challenged to completely owning the space in the most shocking way imaginable? Stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about a boat. It's about power, pride, and the moment someone underestimated the wrong person. Before the storm hit, life had a rhythm, steady, familiar, comforting. She lived in a small riverside town where everyone knew each other's names, or at least thought they did. The morning smelled of fresh bread from the corner bakery, mixed with the tang of river water. Her boat, a modest yet sturdy vessel, was her sanctuary. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. A place where she could breathe, dream, and forget the world's noise. Her name was Monique, and she had spent years building a life that, while quiet, was full of small victories. She worked at a local community center, teaching children how to swim, guiding them through the currents of life as she had learned to navigate her own. Her smile was warm, infectious, and carried the kind of kindness that didn't come from pretending. She genuinely cared. Friends trusted her, neighbors respected her, and the town often relied on her steady presence. Evenings were her favorite. She'd sit on the edge of her boat, legs dangling over the water, the sky painting itself in fiery oranges and soft purples, while the world slowly slowed down. These were moments of peace, unbroken by the prejudice that, deep down, she had learned existed, just not close enough to touch her. Not here, in her quiet corner of the world, but the first hints of tension had started creeping in, subtle, yet undeniable. Small stares when she walked past certain shops. Whispers that she caught just at the edge of her hearing. A subtle edge in the voice of the man who ran the dock. Even some longtime friends started to act differently. Their politeness tinged with something else. Hesitation. Judgment. Perhaps discomfort with the color of her skin. The confidence in her stride. The pride in her ownership of her little slice of freedom. These were things she noticed but didn't confront. Because she believed in hope. In goodwill, in seeing the best in people. But those tiny cracks would soon widen. And when they did, Monique's world, the life she had built with patience, kindness, and resilience, would face its first true challenge. Because the town, the Marina, and even the people she trusted were about to reveal a harsh, bitter reality. A reality that didn't care about her heart, her skill, or her hard work. A reality that judged by color, heritage, and perceived place in the world. And she would be forced to stand her ground in a way she had never imagined. The first incident was subtle. A careless comment from the marina manager, disguised as a friendly reminder about parking her boat slightly differently. But Monique noticed it. Her stomach tightened as he leaned a little too close, voice dripping with condescension. "You know, maybe this spot isn't really for people like you," he said, smirking. Her eyes narrowed, but she smiled politely, masking the storm building inside her. Days passed, and the subtle harassment grew bolder. Fishermen she had known for years began avoiding her, muttering under their breath when she passed. At first, she chalked it up to coincidence, a misunderstanding, but the evidence stacked up like bricks, notes left on her boat, fingers pointing, whispers growing into public gossip. One afternoon, someone had keyed a word into her boat's hull, leaving a mark that burned in her chest every time she saw it. It wasn't just the marina. At the local community center, her colleagues began questioning her competence, scrutinizing her every decision. Meetings that used to be collaborative became judgmental. Requests she made were ignored. Rules that were invisible to others suddenly applied only to her. The sense of injustice cut deeper than any insult, twisting quietly inside her like a slow, relentless current. Then came the confrontation that changed everything. A white man, well-dressed and brimming with entitlement, walked up to her at the dock one bright afternoon. His tone was sharp, accusatory. "You need to move your boat. Now." Monique froze, not from fear, but from disbelief. He didn't know her. He didn't know that she had spent years working, saving, and building a life on this water. His audacity ignited a mix of anger and determination inside her. The crowd of onlookers tensed, some unsure whether to intervene, others waiting for the inevitable clash. She remained calm, letting the moment stretch. Every eye was on her, every heartbeat magnified. And then, with a quiet but powerful voice, she responded, not with fear, but with a question that cut through the tension like a blade. "Do you know who I am?" The man scoffed. "Of course I do. But rules are rules." It was then that Monique revealed a truth so shocking it rippled through the crowd. She owned the marina. Every dock, every slip, every inch of water where they thought they had control. Gasps rose like waves as the man's confident posture faltered. People who had doubted her, who had whispered behind her back, now stared, mouths open. But even this revelation didn't immediately end the struggle. The tension escalated further when others tried to challenge her authority, questioning the legality, the ownership documents, or subtly undermining her credibility. Every day became a test, a battle against systemic prejudice and personal bias. Friends became distant, allies were cautious, and enemies grew bolder. Through it all, Monique's resolve hardened. Each act of defiance, each whisper of disrespect, only fueled her determination to reclaim her space, not just physically but socially, morally, and emotionally. Every insult, every attempted slight became a spark, igniting a fire that would soon engulf the injustice surrounding her. As the sun set on another grueling day, Monique stood at the helm of her boat, staring at the rippling water, knowing the confrontation that would change everything was only just beginning. The calm before the storm had vanished, replaced by a tide of tension that threatened to sweep everyone off balance. What would happen when power and prejudice collided head-on? Would she stand her ground? Or would the pressure of public humiliation finally break her? The tension had been building for weeks, each slight whisper and insult a stone added to a dam that could no longer hold. Monique's heart raced as she approached the dock that morning, her hands gripping the edges of her boat like anchors to her resolve. The sun glinted off the water, but its brightness couldn't drown the storm that was about to break. He was there, smug, towering in confidence, oblivious to the force he was about to awaken. "Move your boat. Now!" he barked again, this time with a sharper edge, louder, more public. Crowds gathered, sensing the impending explosion. Some leaned in eagerly, others nervously, but every eye was on her. For a heartbeat, Monique said nothing. The words of past insults, betrayals, and systemic injustice replayed in her mind. The whispers at the community center, the casual glares at the Marina, the subtle attempts to undermine her authority. She had tolerated it all, maintained grace, held back her anger. But not anymore. Her voice cut through the chatter, low at first, then rising with unstoppable power. "Do you know who I am?" The man laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Yes, but the rules apply to everyone." Monique's hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage tempered by resolve. "No," she said, voice steady now. "The rules don't apply to me. I own this marina. Every dock, every slip, every inch of water you think you control." Shock rippled through the crowd. The man's jaw tightened. He faltered, the arrogance draining from his posture. People whispered, some in awe, some in disbelief. The weight of her words hung in the air like lightning before a storm. But the battle wasn't over. Others stepped forward, challenging her ownership, questioning documents, questioning her legitimacy. A man from the fishing club scoffed, "You can't just—" "Yes, I can," Monique interrupted, voice like steel. "And I have." Her confidence grew as she stepped onto the dock, moving toward him. Every eye followed, the tension electric, the air thick with anticipation. She wasn't just defending her boat or her space, she was defending her dignity, her life, her identity. Each step was a statement. "I will not be erased." The man tried to retort, but her calm authority made him hesitate. She pulled out the papers, legal documents proving her ownership, and held them high. The crowd leaned in. Even those who doubted her could no longer ignore the truth. "You thought you could intimidate me," she said, voice unwavering. "But you forgot one thing. I am not afraid of you, and I will not be silenced." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, the power had shifted. He had commanded and ordered, but now he was exposed, vulnerable, small. Monique's eyes burned with a mixture of triumph and relief. The culmination of months of struggle and humiliation distilled into this one moment. And then, as if to punctuate her victory, she smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of lips that carried every ounce of pain, strength and perseverance she had endured. The crowd held its breath, hanging on the edge of her next move. But the storm wasn't entirely over. Across the marina, murmurs of resentment, whispers of revenge, and the simmering tension of unacknowledged prejudice lingered. She had won this battle, but the war for respect, equality, and justice was far from finished. Monique looked out over the water, feeling the weight of every insult and slight lift off her shoulders. She had faced the arrogance, the entitlement, and the prejudice, and she had emerged unbroken, powerful, and visible. Her eyes locked on the man who now avoided her gaze, shrinking under the undeniable force of truth, and in that charged silence, she whispered, not to him, but to herself, "This is only the beginning." The chaos that had gripped the marina slowly began to settle. Monique stood on her boat, the warm glow of the late afternoon sun reflecting off the water, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't known in months. Around her, the docks were quiet, the murmurs of the crowd now softened into contemplative whispers. The battle for respect, though intense, had left her victorious, not just in ownership, but in spirit. For days after the confrontation, the impact rippled through the community. Those who had once whispered behind her back now approached her with tentative respect. Some apologized, shyly admitting they had underestimated her, while others simply nodded, acknowledging her authority without words. The Marina, once a place of subtle tension and covert hostility, began to feel like the space she had always dreamed of, safe, respected, and fair. Her victory, however, was about more than reclaiming property. It became a symbol, a reminder that courage and dignity could overcome arrogance and systemic prejudice. Local news outlets picked up the story, portraying it as a tale of resilience, courage, and justice. Social media buzzed with support for Monique, praising her for standing her ground in the face of entitlement and bias. Comments flooded in from people who had faced similar challenges, drawing inspiration from her unwavering resolve. Yet, the experience left deeper lessons than public recognition could provide. Monique noticed the subtle changes in herself. She no longer hesitated when asserting her worth. The fear that had once lingered in corners of her mind had been replaced with confidence, sharpened and tempered by struggle. She understood the power of standing firm in the truth, of refusing to allow prejudice to define her life or limit her potential. The man who had challenged her, once so confident in his entitlement, now avoided confrontation. He moved about the Marina with cautious awareness, confronted daily by the undeniable fact that he had misjudged someone based on skin color, underestimating strength, intelligence, and character. In his avoidance, Monique realized something profound. Arrogance fueled by bias inevitably collapses when met with courage grounded in truth. Community dynamics shifted too. People began conversations they had avoided before, discussing the subtle biases that had gone unchecked, examining assumptions that had undermined unity. Local organizations offered workshops on inclusion and awareness. Friends she had thought lost returned, eager to rebuild bridges and learn from the incident. Monique's courage had sparked more than individual respect. It began a slow, tangible healing in the community. Even the fishing club, which had once dismissed her with disdain, reached out to acknowledge her rightful ownership and contributions. She accepted, but on her terms, with fairness, with clarity, and with a gentle insistence that respect must be mutual. The balance of power had shifted, not through aggression, but through dignity and steadfast resolve. Monique reflected on the months of harassment, whispers, and undermining gestures. At times the burden had felt unbearable. The subtle racism, the blatant prejudice, the humiliation, it had tested every ounce of her patience and courage. But it had also revealed her own strength, her ability to endure, and the transformative power of confronting injustice head-on. In the weeks and months that followed, she continued her work at the community center. Now more influential and confident than ever, children looked up to her, inspired not just by her skills or kindness, but by her refusal to be diminished by bigotry. Her story became a teaching moment, an example of how one individual's courage can spark awareness and change in an entire community. Monique also understood that victory was not just about her personal triumph. Racism, she knew, destroys families, isolates communities, and poisons relationships. Prejudice weakens social bonds, erodes trust, and blinds people to shared humanity. By confronting injustice, by standing firm, she had not only reclaimed her space, but she had offered a blueprint for resilience. Courage defeats hate. Truth dismantles false assumptions, and unity brings healing. Her life returned to a quieter rhythm, but it was richer and more profound than before. Every glance at her boat, every ripple of water against the dock, reminded her of the journey she had endured. She had been tested, publicly humiliated, and forced to confront systemic bias. Yet she emerged not only victorious but stronger, more self-assured, and deeply aware of her capacity to inspire change. The moral was clear, and it resonated with every person who heard her story. Courage matters. Standing up against injustice is never easy, but it transforms not just the oppressed, but the oppressors, the community, and the world around them. Racism may seek to diminish, but resilience, dignity, and truth can dismantle it entirely. And so, as Monique gazed at the calm water of the Marina, her Marina, she whispered quietly to herself, "I will never let hate define me. I will never let fear control me, and I will always stand for what is right." The community watched, learned, and slowly, over time, the lessons spread. Families healed, relationships mended, and the once tense Marina became a place of respect, understanding, and unity. Monique's journey reminded everyone that courage is contagious, that truth cannot be hidden, and that one person's strength can ignite the light of justice in an entire community.